Okay, let's move on. Emma and Barry and Chris, do you want to join us on stage? So I was lucky enough to be invited to Spotify in Sweden a few months ago, and we had loads of interesting conversations about different things, and visualization obviously came up, and it's a big part of their strategy. They said that in 2024, watches to podcasts, people watching podcasts, went up by 20%. And they said that if given the choice, audio versus video, 3 out of 5 people chose video, and the proportion of people watching as opposed to listening went up the younger the listener was. So things are changing. The market is clearly changing. And certainly, as the market is growing and as more and more people are coming into the podcast space, more and more listeners, more and more of the audience, I think the way people are consuming our content is changing, which obviously presents lots of challenges. And I hope we'll talk about some of those challenges now, but it also presents lots of opportunities as well. So let's try and navigate some of those challenges and opportunities. We have Emma, Barry, Chris, and Rianne on this part of the session. And our first speaker is Emma.
Hi everyone, how are we all today? We all excited? Woohoo! Yeah, give me a woohoo! I'm Emma. I'm from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. I help teams visualise their podcasts. I want to start by saying thank you so much for welcoming me home. As you all know, Australians became European in 2015 when we first entered the Eurovision Song Contest. So thank you so much for having me here today at home. So I'm going to be talking to you about how you can use video. It's really exciting. You can use it to expand your audience. And I'm going to show you just some really simple tips on how you can become video producers in your own way. So just by these 3 simple rules or tips. So 1, be selective. 2, always optimize. And 3, make intentional vertical video. Can somebody put up their hands again about who's making vertical video here? Okay, not many. By the end of this, you're all going to be putting your hands up. That's how excited you are. Okay, when I say be selective, I want you to really think about what podcasts and what kind of video you're going to be making when you're making video for podcasting. Video can take a while to make. You've got to shoot it and you've got to edit it. So you want to be really selective as to what moments, topics, and podcasts you want to take. Not all podcasts need to be video. I think I can see some sighs at that. That's all good. But if you do it, it's a really fantastic opportunity to expand your audience. And you want to be going for a quality over a quantity approach. So a lot of these platforms like TikTok and YouTube, the people will say, put on as much as possible, it's going to work. But we haven't found that's the best strategy at the ABC. So we've been really selective with what formats we want to take. So it doesn't always have to be full episodes, You've got clipped moments, you've got vertical video, and you've got full episodes. So you've got lots of different options. These platforms as well are all topic-based. So you want to be really selective as to what topics are going to work. So on that, when we did some piloting of video podcasts, we wanted to select a YouTube channel that had a really healthy account. So for that was our science account. So we chose some science podcasts to test. Because you want to set up your podcast for success. You don't want to test things and only 17 people watch them. You want to be really giving it the best opportunity to succeed. One of the podcasts that performed the best was our health podcast. And the episode that performed the best was an audio-only version. So it was on how often should I shower. I don't know if that means like Australians are really smelly or something, maybe. I'm not sure. But because we optimized it, it was the best performing podcast for that entire pilot, and that's because YouTube is really topics based. So on that optimization though, I cannot stress this enough, optimization is absolutely key. This title could also be called How to Win on YouTube Without Giving $1 million or a Ferrari away. We can't all be Mr. Beast. So what are some things you can do to succeed? So as I've already mentioned, YouTube is very algorithmic based. So it's all driven on topics. So that's why you find so many new audiences through YouTube, is because they're being fed topics that they're interested in. So you need to tell YouTube what your video is about, and the best way to do that is by using YouTube's inbuilt features. So that would be really catchy title and description, fantastic thumbnails, we'll be coming into that, and chapters. So with the title, so if you're putting it on YouTube, you need to remember that an audience isn't going to know what your podcast is. You don't want to lead on the title of your podcast or your host. They might not know who they are. So you need to really lean into the topic, and also if you have a really fantastic guest. If you have Dolly Parton on your show, lead it in with the start with Dolly Parton, but put your podcast name after there. You also want the title to work really well for SEO. So it turns up in YouTube searches, but also Google searches as well. You also want it to be really short and dynamic, and it doesn't have to match your podcast title. This ABC example here at the bottom, that's the podcast title. But for the YouTube one, it's "What is Trump doing to the FBI?" It's really short and says what it is on the tin. You want to make it really succinct. Chaptering is also really key if you want to optimize on YouTube as well. It's a really great way, especially if you have a longer podcast, to break down what you're going to be talking about in your podcast. How many people here do narrative style podcasts, like true crime? And how many more people are doing like chat style? Okay, cool, about 50-50. So both of the options, it's a really great opportunity to break down what you're going to be talking about. And also it works in with SEO again, our best friend SEO. We love search engine optimization, in case you didn't know what that means. Okay, thumbnails, which I cannot stress enough, is the most crucial bit if you're considering jumping into YouTube. I would say almost as much as creating the video itself, we've discovered that so much energy should be put into making the thumbnails. So much so, in this imaginary blue sky world, imagine you have lots of extra cash. I would suggest investing in a designer rather than just using some templated practices. What you want for the thumbnail is it to be really eye-catching. So there's thousands of other videos out there on the topic you're probably talking about. So you want to be able to catch the audience's attention straight away with really powerful imagery, but also really clear text. A lot of people are watching YouTube on their phone, so it needs to be really easy to read, and you want it to work with the title. So you don't want to be telling the same story in both. Working the thumbnail and the title together are a really great way to get more about what your video is going to be or your podcast is going to be. And that brings me to my next point, that the thumbnail has to really clearly say what the podcast is about. We learnt from one of our podcasts, a science podcast on animals, that you can see in this green line there and the blue. So the blue is returning viewers. So they're people who know the account. They're staying for the whole video. But you can see at that 30-second mark, new viewers are really dropping off quickly. And that was because we realised we were selling a different narrative than what the video was actually about. We thought, oh, we're going to capture them because we're talking about how Disney lied to us about The Lion King. But people thought we were going to be doing like a movie analysis, where it was actually about science. So you really need to make sure it's really clear on the thumbnail what your video is going to be about. And with that, this is what's so fantastic about these third-party platforms, is that they can give you probably a little scary amount of data, let's be honest, but you can really use it to inform your own podcast and make improvements constantly to your work. So this here, the one in the orange, is the podcast that we did where we optimized it, where those other podcasts at the ABC aren't optimized. So you can just see how important it is. It was able to outpace the growth of all other non-ABC podcasts, and that's because of the optimization. So remember to optimize. Okay, and my final point, make intentional vertical video. Vertical video is so exciting because not only is it a great way to expand your audiences, how young people, research shows around 75% of young people, that's how they find their podcasts, but it's also a great way to connect with your existing audiences as well. If you're making vertical video and selecting moments to take out, I want you to make sure you have one of these three that you're going to hit. So that's informative. Is it teaching the audience something? Is it educational? Are they walking away with learning something? 2, is it topical? Is it really engaging for the audience? Is it going to bring debate into the comments, bring that engagement in social media? Or 3, is it emotive? So is it a really powerful, shocking, sad, really funny moment that your audience can connect with? But with vertical video, personally, my favorite thing about it is that it's not just clips. I want you to really think beyond clips. So obviously, yes, you've got clips, and that's a great way of showing what your podcast is about. But you've got voxies, you've got explainers, and you've got behind the scenes. It's a great way to connect with your existing audience and expand your podcast world. So rather than just thinking about they listen to it once a week, they can show the behind the scenes and connect with that audience on a deeper level. I mean, that's why we love podcasting, right? Is because I think I'm best friends with my favorite podcast hosts. So I love to see what they're up to on social media, particularly when they're making the podcast. And it's a great way to connect with that audience. Okay, so the key takeaways for you all to become the best video producers when it comes to podcasting is: 1, be selective, both on format. It doesn't just have to be vertical video or episodes. You can do a mix. You also want to be selective on your topic as well and where it's going to live. There's no such thing as failing. Test and learn. These platforms give you so much data that you can constantly figure out what you can do to improve. 3, optimization is key. And 4, use video as a chance to expand your podcast world. Audiences want to know more about your presenters more than ever. Give your presenters the keys to the city and let them show their personalities off to the world. So thank you so much for the time, everyone, today. Yep.
Brill.
Come up.
Thank you. You mentioned the scary data.
Scary data.
On YouTube. So what have you got access to? And I'm sure a lot of people in the room will have the same access. But then, like, what are you actually looking at?
Yep.
And kind of what are you doing with it?
So particularly, it depends on what like your goal is. So if your goal is to improve the content, you could be looking off where people are dropping off. It gives you data like that. But if your goal is to get new audiences, you can actually break down in YouTube to see the data for new audiences, like I did with the one with the thumbnail there. So you can see where new audiences are dropping off. You can also see what those new audiences, where they're coming from. So are they finding, for example, that Australians are really smelly looking up how often should I shower, example. That was predominantly, we were seeing, that was coming through Google searches. So you can see what your audience is doing and also like how they're finding your content and also what else they're looking at. So it can give you lots of clues as to what else they might be interested in watching as well.
Great, very interesting. We'll have more. Next to the stage, Barry.
Hello again. I know you all missed me so much. It's been so long. Okay, I am really coming at this from the perspective of Pineapple, which we had only ever done audio, and then suddenly everyone wants video. And so kind of like, what do you do in that situation? What do you need to consider and things like that? Emma, that was fantastic, and I took so many notes. And maybe mine is not as optimistic as hers, but maybe if I had watched that first, I would have a different perspective. My initial thought is don't just jump on the bandwagon. I don't think that all podcasts need video. I feel like I'm maybe having deja vu. I don't know. Again, I'm obviously American. But like a decade ago, this was happening in news where it was just suddenly everyone was pivoting to video, and that was the pivot to video. And I don't think, like, if you think about how many media companies were actually successful in that, and how many continue to do what they did best. And so I think that video can be really fantastic, but it is not necessary for every single podcast. And I think it will keep being important in 2025 until it's not. So I do think there are advantages. And so if you are really thinking about whether or not to do it and you decide, yes, I think that it is important to have video, then here are some things to consider. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to bring in more revenue by going to YouTube? That might be something where then you're going to want to do full video. Are you trying to do discoverability and kind of tackle that issue? Then video can be really great. Are you trying to make a really simple podcast? Then video's not going to be helpful. Are you trying to just have more content to be able to then or more ways to be able to market your podcast? Video can be super helpful there. We have found at least that there's not a ton of conversion from a static image on social media to continued listenership, but when you have video, you get way more views on social media, and also there tends to be more of a conversion rate to go from social to the actual podcast when there is video to start. It doesn't mean that the whole episode then needs to be video, but to capture people, to market, video is incredibly helpful. And so that is another thing to be considering is, okay, you do really want video for marketing. You do really want to use video in those types of ways. So then you're going to be asking yourself, are you making this podcast video first or audio first? There are different ways to do it. And it really, I don't mean to be like, I think video can be really exciting and helpful. So you are reaching different audiences though. And here's an example of where I think it cannot be helpful. I was an absolutely loyal podcast listener to this show hosted by two brilliant comedians. For 4 years, every single week, Tuesdays, I was locked in, I was listening. They moved off of the network they were on. They went to be an independent podcast on Patreon. I said, absolutely, I'm gonna pay. I think I even was like the higher ranking of, the like paid media, whatever. And I was, because I love them so much. But they pivoted straight to video when they went independent, and the show is unlistenable now. It is really you are only able to watch it. If you are listening to it, they're constantly drawing. I mean, again, I love them. They're weird comedians. They're constantly drawing when they are doing the show now, and then showing each other the drawings, and not describing it at all. And I stopped listening, and I was one of their gotta be most loyal listeners, went to their live shows, everything. So you have to think about what you are doing on the show, and are you doing it mostly for a video audience, which if you are, that's great, but if you're also doing it for audio, you have to think about it that way too. And what else do I want to say? There are ways to do it where you're thinking about audio first. You can be doing the whole thing as video and putting it out as video for YouTube, but then doing one last edit of the audio, and you could even just like cut a few of those things that are visual references, things that you think people will be less interested in hearing. It's a little bit more work, but it's really just one more edit pass, and using the audio on the RSS feeds. That is one thing that you could do. And then we also have done it where a client came to us to produce a podcast, and I'll show a clip in a second, where they really wanted video for social media, not necessarily to have the entire podcast be video, which meant that we got to do a lot more with audio, sound design, and things like that. But we wanted it to still look good. So what we did was we would completely produce audio. We would, capture it on film, but we didn't worry about the edits that we were making. And then we would find the chunks of the episode where we made fewer edits, and we'd say, okay, this is a part where we can show them on video. Clearly, I'm not a video producer. And then we also made sure that like the visuals around it wasn't just a waveform, there was something nice happening too. So here's a clip of what we did, I think.
I'm a little bit psychic, so I really believe.
So we would start with this
you
quote
have to
card,
manifest what you want.
where we'd have a cold open in the
Particularly
audio, but we would
design
have
work.
this
You
really
to believe in
nicely
yourself and really
designed thing.
Manifest who you want to be.
And then we made sure that the intro was
to the
something
Culture
that
Lounge
we
podcast
could
from Sweden.
just do narration and have a really beautifully, like we had a whole day where we did B-roll, and we shot with the host going around. Asoline is a visual brand. They make books. And so they had this gorgeous archive, and we could go through, and we did this really lovely intro. But then, so the visual stayed the same for everything except for when we would bring up these, like, not the quote cards, the intro of who they were and kind of IDing them. And you're getting a really beautiful audio experience if you're not watching, but if you are watching, you have this kind of thing. But we were trying to make this a thing where we could do it every time and not have to change the intro of the visually. And it worked really well. And then, I think this intro is a little bit long maybe, it would go to these two. There he is, there's Alex Asseline. So that would be the intro, and then we would go to a waveform, and then at times we would go back to the two-way. And that was just a way that we were kind of blending, going audio first, but still having the visual, and then they used a ton of the video for social media. Even if it wasn't in the podcast itself in the final edit, they were looking for having a bunch of content, and podcast was part of it. So that was a way that we kind of did it. If you do decide that you want to do video, full video first, not the crazy thing that we did there, here are some things to consider if you are an audio producer and suddenly now you're a video producer. For filming, do you care about visual consistency? The answer is probably yes, you should. But if you do you care about that within the segments that you're going? One of the things I love about audio production is you don't have to worry about those things. You don't have to be consistent in, oh, wait, we're wearing the same shirt or a different shirt from last time. Are people going to notice that your hair is different? That kind of thing. You have to think about that now. What does camera ready mean to you and your guests? Some guests might be fine showing up in sweatpants. A lot of guests will not. And also a thing that I learned real quick, don't wear logos. These are things you have to start thinking about because you will have to pay licensing fees. Production process, thinking about how many cameras you want to use. A three-way camera setup, if you have the budget for it, is I think the best way to have what we as audio producers are more used to, which is the ability to really edit, really cut ums, things like that. If you have a three-way setup, you have a lot of coverage to be able to do that. You're gonna have to adjust your editing process. Your producers are either gonna start with a paper edit or do live editing with a video editor, which I think is super fun. I genuinely love that kind of stuff. And then also think about how it's going to affect your post-production schedule because video takes longer. You need stronger internet. You need to pay for stronger internet. It takes a lot longer to ingest the visual kind of aspect, and you're going to be using different software you're usually not downloading the actual file. You are using something like Frame.io, and those things also all impact budget. So just quick things that for me came up when we were suddenly producing the Trevor Noah podcast, and we signed up for an audio podcast, and then suddenly it was a video podcast, and we were like, hey, our budget has to change because people want hair and makeup, they want crafty, they want their snacks and food. If you're doing video, you might have to be paying for a set decorator and props. Like I said, video collaborator software. You're going to need bigger hard drives, and you will probably have to pay for internet in a different way. So I think another question to ask yourself is, at what point are we producing a TV show and calling it a podcast? That's more industry implications. Yeah. So those are just some things. Sorry, I think I went for like a bajillion minutes, but
that is great. Thank you so much. And Reid, do you want to join us? Some really, really interesting, thoughtful points there from both. Should we start off with you guys again? Does anyone have a comment or a question that they want us to kind of get stuck into to start with? Yeah, we have this lady in the green top, Sarah or Anna, just here in the middle. And then we can get started. I mean, loads of fascinating stuff. YouTube, data, short form, long form formats. Where would you like us to start?
I'd just like you to maybe talk a little bit more about production value. I'm Tina. I'm from the Danish radio equivalent to BBC, and it's both a TV and a radio house. And we are just getting into video podcasting. And one big issue for us is to make people understand that this is not a TV show, it's a video podcast. So we talk a lot about production value and also what's the why are we making video podcasts? And the way I see it, it's much more about the relationship to the listeners, making them feel like more of being part in the room than it's high production value. But what are your thoughts about that? Are we in a TV aesthetics, or is it much more YouTube aesthetics where the high production value is not that important?
I can take this one. So at the ABC, we do not have video podcast studios. I don't think it is at a TV level. Like, you know, it can be really intimate. If you have high budget, that's great. You can make it look really polished. For example, for the podcast we did, I bought material and hung them up in a radio studio to hide the fact it was a radio studio. And I built IKEA furniture. And that's what I did. And I like designed a set myself. Low cost budget, but just by taking a really simple approach, or even those color backdrops that we use a lot in digital video as well, did that. There was some, the podcast is called What the Duck, found some ducks, put them on a bookshelf, and was able to create, like, it looks like a YouTube like podcast. It doesn't have to be TV quality, you know, it is digital, people are used to it, particularly if it's short form video. People are expecting, you can still film it on your phone, like, but there's definitely ways, like, get creative with it. Like, if you have got a radio studio, there's a way to just like elevate it without it costing too much money and having that full TV production. But that's from a very much a public broadcaster way, on the cheap.
I'm going to pitch in, also public service broadcaster. I don't think there's any rules yet. So in the last year, we've had a full, you know, bells and whistles TV version of a podcast. Like, it went to TV. And then additionally, we had an additional podcast sort of off the back of the TV series, which we turned into a TV show, but it cost way less than the original TV series. Production value is very, very high, and it went out on telly and everyone was very happy. And then we've also got the visualized podcast, which you can do for not much money, but I think you should still do your very best to do really well. So I think that's about choices. So how much of this are we going to do? How are we doing it? Which audience is it for? And then I think that drives the aesthetic of it, and also the platform it goes onto. And then also to sit very comfortably with things that are just audio. When I say just, that's pejorative. I mean, they're audio and they love being audio. And then you're talking about social media assets, I suppose, to promote those. So I don't think there's any rules yet, and I would rush to say, let's not have any rules. Let's look at our brands and see what the opportunities are and what our budget is and what our resources are to turn things into visual offers.
I think you have to look at what's achievable with the team you have as well. Like, when we built new studios in the last couple of years, it was with the idea that it's going to be one producer who's also looking after the talent and trying to monitor the show and everything like that. So it has to be one button, easy, set and forget to a point, to make sure that we do capture, because we capture video for everything we make, especially in studio. But we don't have a TV crew. We don't have an OB truck outside. We're one person generally, and then it's also on the back end of that, how quickly, easily can I get the footage, turn it around, get it to the teams that might be across the whole country. So it's about those workflows and systems, and that can inform, you know, however the top your setup might be. One of the best, we don't make it, but one of the best looking podcasts in terms of just a chat show in Australia, Shameless, I know they just film on iPhones. They have 3 iPhones on tripods in front of them, turned around, and they manage a great product out of that, with a lot of video footage that they put up.
Barry and Emma mentioned kind of the production of the video and then the kind of post-production of the video, and you just said a word which I say a lot, which is process with this stuff. So interested from you guys and maybe people in the room about like the kind of setup, the training that's had to go in place, the changes that you've made to processes, like that one person.
I mean, it's changing and evolving. In fact, yesterday we got approved for, so I run the sound design team, right? So we're all Pro Tools, we're the audio team that does all the chopping. We all got given Premiere licenses yesterday, because there is a point this year where we are going to be thinking about chopping video first, because at the moment it's not efficient for us we have 2 teams chopping it separately.
And
so an audio team...
Video first as well. You just said video first.
Cut from video first doesn't mean we won't refine audio later, but at least have one person doing the initial first pass edit, so that you're not having just 2 teams do the same work in 2 different directions. We also don't necessarily have a long form video strategy yet. We're not big on full video podcasts on YouTube. We use it for mid form and short form, but the world is changing, and so we need to be prepared for that.
What's mid form?
Mid-form for us is, say, in an hour-long podcast, we might put up a 15-minute section, so it is longer and gives you a taste of the interview, but it's not wholly cannibalising your audio offering, I guess, because we're commercial, and until we can have our ads on YouTube, not Google AdSense, we don't want to be pushing too much to YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. So our process was, even though it was filmed video first, the podcast producer has the first edit on it. Like, it give the power to the podcast team. They've started it, and so they'll build the sequence in Premiere, and then I'll take it for the video. They make it in Reaper for the podcast, and then if it's got lots of sound design, I actually give it back to that podcast producer, and they add, for narrative, they can add all the little bells and whistles in, and it gives them, what they love, like their final touch on their own podcast. So it's all about, not taking it away from them, like still giving them a sign off of their quality as well.
I'm getting a sense already that on this particular topic, there's like a lot of things to discuss. So we'll try and get through as much as we can. I think we've got 2 questions that we'll take from the front. Emma, and then this.
Hi, I'm Emma. I work at the BBC. I had a question really about synchronizing audio and video, as in, like, regardless of which one you're choosing to do first, how tightly are people tied to making sure that the edit is the same in both formats, that you'll get identical episodes basically out of that?
Yeah, and should we take this question as well from this gentleman? Oh, okay, okay. Okay, so is YouTube and RSS exactly the same?
It can be. For the Trevor Noah podcast, it was that we put it out. We uploaded, I think, the MP4, and that was just it. But you can also do it differently. And that's what I was saying, where, like, if you have a bunch of visual references, you have a whole segment in the video where you guys are talking about a drawing that was hilarious, maybe you snip that out and put an MP3 through the RSS feed instead of the full video.
And obviously one of the challenges here, I said YouTube, actually the challenge here is Spotify, where Spotify require the video and the audio to be exactly the same.
Yeah, so we would have like a different RSS feed basically for Spotify versus all the other. When you start to do that, it gets more complicated. So it's kind of just easier to make it the same.
Yeah, same for us. So exactly, that's an issue for Spotify that they're still trying to figure out because it has to be the same. But for YouTube, we take it's a different format. So you can record 2 separate openings. For a podcast opening, you might have a more cold opening. But for YouTube, you probably want to get to the point a bit quicker and like intro the topic, get into it quicker. So yeah, I would say different approaches. And it's only like a couple of line differences as well. So you can record it all at one go. So it doesn't make it too difficult.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Hi, Vladimir from Serbia, from Podcast.rs. We are kind of a regional studio and aggregator of the podcasts from the former Yugoslav republics. And I've just recently, with a great colleague from Germany, Roman Kern, I've just developed a video podcasting course for the Deutsche Welle Academy. So for the people who are interested in that's an option as well. So I love this, Barry, your question at the end, because for someone who lives out of podcasting for quite some time, I mean, we started in 2019, and in Serbia, YouTube was always a dominant platform. In 2019, we had no Spotify. There was no like podcast-specific platforms, so people were from day one on video. And for us, video podcasting is something that, like, people in Serbia, they say that they watch podcasts. They don't listen to podcasts. So I think, like, when we talk, I mean, we are now coming more and more towards a situation where we finally, I think, need to realize that we are not talking about podcasting. Podcasting does not exist. It's actually creating an on-demand radio and television program. Because, like, when we talk about video podcasting, we can only visualize, or we can only record certain types of podcasts. So they are interviews or panels or kind of a discussions. That's it. You cannot visualize in this manner narrative-driven podcast, because then you're doing a TV documentary, right? And the production cost just goes through the roof. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we are all dealing with creating a TV shows. And it's just like, you have to think, do you really need this? Are you ready to create a TV show? Or is your podcast, or, well, on-demand radio show, something that actually has more value for you and for your audience. So this is just a comment. So
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
should we deal with the kind of the skeptics question? Should I bother?
My initial slides title was "Why Video Isn't the Villain," so it feels very fitting for this. Particularly, I want to pick up on your comment about narrative podcasts. That one that I showed, that example there, that started as a podcast only, and then they tried to test some video out, and they found that the video outperformed the podcast by so much. And yes, even though it doesn't look like a podcast, it's very YouTube, down the barrel, talking directly to the audience. It is still the podcast, and I find it's great because you're getting so much extra added elements from this huge journalistic integrity and how much effort people are putting in to make their podcast. So it's a great way to get more out of your buck. In terms of that one, they just did some small pilots and tests to see how it would perform. They saw the audience appetite was there, and then they built a small studio in the host's house. So it's in his basement. They've got a little YouTube setup where they record it all in one go. So I'd say narrative, I would say, works so well, particularly for YouTube, because it just seems like it is a YouTube video, which is YouTube was it essay. That's what people would think it is. But yeah, think of it less as it's lost the podcast, and more wow, aren't we so happy more people than ever are consuming our fantastic work that we've been doing. That's how I see it.
I mean, I think that esoteric question of what is a podcast? I mean, whatever was it or what is it today is constantly changing. And I had a conversation just earlier today to go, ultimately the platform doesn't matter, it's the content that matters. And so what we're making is, if it's a great idea and what's the intent of the idea, then where does it live? I did come across recently a fascinating, I toured a studio in Singapore, and they talked about they were having lots of people come in doing ghost podcasts, and I'd never heard that term before. And I asked him what it was, and he said they come in and record for a full hour with camera set up and microphones, like a typical podcast, but the podcast doesn't exist. It never goes out as a podcast. All that goes up is 60-second clips on TikTok, and that's the only place it exists. But most people, I'm certainly guilty of watching a podcast and having never listened to the audio. I've only ever seen clips of Diary of a CEO or something like that. So I think that's really fascinating, this idea of capturing the zeitgeist of what a podcast is, of two, we're now calling two people in a studio having a conversation a podcast, even if it no longer exists in audio form.
Rianne mentioned the phrase defining success in the last session, and I guess we've kind of got a similar challenge here, where we're maybe either speaking to our bosses or looking at the budget, and it's just okay, well, what is success? If you've never actually listened to the podcast that you've watched several times,
Well, exactly, and what's your measurement, right? So we're having this argument in Australia at the moment to go, we're a commercial business, so we're going based on what we can sell, and what we can sell is numbers in the ranker, so that's what we're aiming for. So that only comes from our audio downloads. Our impressions on socials and our impressions on YouTube do not count towards the audience that we can sell on. So do we need to re-look at our measurement devices and our metrics for how we compare ourselves against our peers, especially in a commercial arena? That's the sort of questions we're going to be looking at as the formats and platforms change.
From a public service point of view, I think there's a lot to be said for just taking a bit of a breath and looking at your programmes individually. I mean, I'm kind of repeating what everyone said, really. But it's who is that audience, and which platform are they on? And what is your job? Is it to retain that audience and keep them for audio? So are you introducing them to on-demand if they've lived with live? That's a big win. And if you are absolutely going after a new audience, then you need to be canny about what you're doing on the platform where the new audience is. I just think sometimes we can all get into a little bit of a rush to where the ball is currently on the pitch, instead of thinking about what's the next space it's gonna move into. So I think it's about agility, being prepared to move where you need to move, but also really asking the question so that you're doing the right thing, not everything for every single brand. And I can hear that quite a lot where I am, is we need to do this, 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 and this. Actually, maybe we just need to do this bit, and we need to do it well and see if it's working. So I'm a fan of visualization, but in many, many different versions, variations of it, and to suit the audience that we're after. And then one other question for me is, when we're working with the aforementioned talent, what do they want? So them coming with I want it all to be visualized, and I want it all to be on YouTube, you know, and that's the challenge they're bringing to us before they sign up, whereas it might not be the right thing for them, or you might not have the money or the people.
Great. I think we have a question over here.
Yes, I'll just stand up. I'm Franz Retief. I'm from South Africa. This has been fascinating. We've got a podcast and streaming platform. It's one of the largest in Africa, and we have about 300 different podcasters and radio stations on it. And the video question is very big, and we are still sort of at the point of, I need to be on YouTube. So the type of things that I was interested in is firstly your discussion around goal. Why do you want to be there? We find in Africa that data is still very expensive. A lot of people listen while they're commuting. So video is much more expensive to listen to, not just to produce. There's also, of course, the joke about having a face for radio, for podcasting versus being a video producer. The question that I'm interested in is more about monetization and syndication. And I want to tell a story. We've got a large business podcast, and the guy phones me last year. He says, listen, I've got 20 times as many YouTube viewers as my podcast listeners, but I'm getting more money from your platform. Why is that? And I said to him, well, it's simple, because I've got a direct sales model. So we sell at very high CPM. And another story, when Spotify came into South Africa, they initially wanted to have a model where you have to host on Spotify. And we work with most of the large radio stations and broadcasters as well. And they went back and they said, this doesn't help us. You know, we monetize through a specific platform. The rates are much better. We are not going to do that. In actual fact, Media24, which is part of the Tencent group, which is a very large media group, they don't syndicate at all. You have to go to their platform to listen to the podcast, because if you've got a guy listening on your own platform, on your own website, they see, you know, your messages. I think Serial did that. You know, you try and pull people in, you have additional information, you can make a lot more if you've got people in your own ecosystem. So one of the challenges, I think that, and I'd like to have your comments on that, is sort of, you know, what type of numbers are you guys seeing in terms of your own radio platform? And keep in mind that audio is unique in the sense that it's the theater of the mind. You know, it's a background activity. Video and text you have to read, you have to physically engage. But you can listen to a podcast while you're cycling or doing the dishes or everything else. So what's your views or your experience in terms of the numbers between video and audio? I'd also be very keen to find out from the room, what is a successful podcast? Because we find in our market, you know, a successful podcast has got maybe 100,000 views, 100,000 listens a month on podcasting, maybe into the millions. But it's not huge numbers, and you have to sort of make a decent income from that as a podcaster. So what's your views in terms of monetization, syndication, and you're playing off the two, audio versus video?
Lots of stuff in there. Who wants to jump in? I mean, I think one of the conversations that we've been having at the BBC, and Chris, you said the word cannibalization. So if you put your podcast on YouTube, will it cannibalize your RSS, or in our case, BBC Sounds audience? In my experience, no. Not in any way. Doesn't touch it. Because it's a different audience, and it's coming to you in a different way. Because, you know, especially I think with YouTube, the most important reason to be on YouTube is the search functionality. The search functionality in YouTube, powered by Google, is so much better than the podcast providers. So and is also being used in a different way. So I think in my experience, the podcasts that I've put on YouTube have ended up finding a completely different audience and not in any way cannibalizing the RSS and Sounds audience.
Yeah, I would suggest there's some level of a game of wanting to gatekeep our content a little bit from YouTube at the moment until we get the terms more favourably on our side from a commercial point of view. So, you know, as you said, a direct sales, if we can control the ads that are in our podcast more directly, the return for everyone in the game is much better, and we don't want to hand over too much control to the Metas and Googles of the world.
And are you making per listener CPM? Are you making less money on YouTube than you are on RSS?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How much less?
I'm not the sales guy, so I don't know the actual.
Does anyone know the answer to that? No.
Well, I gave it sort of more than 20 times in our case, but we don't use programmatic sales for our RSS. We've got a direct sales model where it's sort of like old radio.
You make 20 times more money per listener.
Between 10, 12.
Do you want to pass, Anna? Do you want to pass my microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Let me just check the conversion factor here because I'm trying to get to a common currency.
No
But
problem. Live data. Excellent.
But the model that we use is through partnerships with audio sales houses, and also we're sort of in between radio and podcasting. So we do online audio, which is a combination of streaming radio to podcast, and then we've got a bunch of top, podcast first audiences as well. And because of the sales model being close to radio, it is sold, like old rate card. Radio used to be sold in the past, but on a CPM basis. And it's extremely popular with advertisers because they know exactly where it's going to run. So
I tell you what, you have a little look, and maybe we'll try and come back to you a bit later. Does anyone else want to come in?
I was going to comment on the cannibalisation. ABC is a public broadcaster, so I'm not as across the monetisation. But in terms of the cannibalisation, that was one of the huge tests that we wanted to do. And I wish I have, in another chat I will be doing, there we go, a little plug. You'll see in this graph that while the views, it never took them away, video just absolutely expanded on top of the already existing audience. But as you said, one of the other reasons we wanted to be on YouTube is because it helps audiences discover your podcasts. We found while we were posting on YouTube that the overall audience of our podcast was also growing. Unfortunately, at the ABC, we couldn't do a year-on-year comparison because they changed how they measured data. So I cannot know for sure if that's because of YouTube, but I'm going to say it today, it's because of YouTube.
One of the things which I think came up in your presentation, Emma, was about channel strategy. So at the BBC, we have on YouTube a sounds account, a news account, a world service account, a sport account. We don't have a Radio 4 account, or do we? We have a Radio 4 account. We have any number of different accounts, and there's a bit of a question as to whether some of our biggest podcasts should launch their own account, or whether they should jump on some of these, let's call them, for people that maybe not in kind of radio, like networked accounts. I'm kind of interested to know if you guys have got any thoughts on channel strategy. If I'm honest, I'm kind of desperate for
We
answers.
recently moved to more of a channel-based account as well that we owned. And part of that will be the negotiation with who owns the IP, as we were talking about before. Are we going to help them build this big brand and then they leave us and take their YouTube audience with them? Or can we post under a listener sport, a listener entertainment, a listener, different accounts like that? As to how that strategy is working, I can't particularly tell you that at the moment. But, that is the internal thinking, is that move to more house-owned accounts and post from there.
And you can cross-post, can't you?
Yeah, collab.
Tell us a little bit about cross-posting.
So when you post on YouTube, say you want it to come from your BBC Sounds account, and if they also then had their own personal account, you can feed them so they fit both under your podcast or playlist. We're having a whole issue with strategy on YouTube at the moment at the ABC, really trying to rework it. At the moment, because you can't subscribe to a podcast only on YouTube. So, example, when you hit subscribe, so they've listened to our health podcast on the science YouTube, they're subscribing to the science YouTube, not our actual podcast YouTube. We've heard from YouTube that they're working on that. Who knows when that will be coming in, but we believe, we might take more of a BBC Sound style approach when that happens, to be able to, you could subscribe specifically to one podcast, but at the moment we've found better success by doing them under the genres. So the news podcasts sit under the news ones. Like, we have the science ones, they sit under the science one. But if it was a science and a news one, you could actually collab them to have them both sitting there together.
And does that help with discoverability because it's turning up other shows within the same genre
Yeah.
because they've subscribed to it?
Because you're
Yeah.
playing the algorithm, right?
Yeah, you're playing the algorithm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from a public service point of view, do you have those meetings where people go, we're giving all away our content to third-party
Oh, yeah.
platforms?
Oh, yeah.
You know, because we have BBC iPlayer.
Yeah.
Sam, you should be thinking about channel
Yeah,
strategy,
yeah, yeah.
to be honest. But, you know, that's a big problem, isn't it? It's like,
It's
how much are
huge.
you going to play around on YouTube in order to win people back to your public service platforms?
It's the entire issue. Also, it's not just an issue for radio and podcasting. We have those issues with TV teams as well. And it's trying to, but more work with the teams that are making the content. As I said before, what is really good about these third-party platforms and a lot of these podcast teams, they're keen to be there, one, because they know that's where the audience is, but they're also really keen to find out data. Like, you can't get the data on our own party platforms that YouTube can give them. So they're like, oh my God, wow, like, oh, it is predominantly women, or, oh wow, they're all coming from Sydney, and it's been able to help them tailor their actual podcast content as well. So that's been really interesting. That's how I kind of sell it as well.
Okay, we've probably got time for maybe.
Shall I
one-
quickly give the
one
answer in
question?
terms
Oh,
of the
right,
numbers?
You've got the answer. Is it 20
Yeah,
times?
keep in mind we do radio to podcast and podcast, and it's a limited market. But our average CPM was $31 USD per thousand last
Okay.
month, of which the publisher gets between 57 and 82%. Premium content goes up to 45, and the lowest is about 20. So those are the sort of numbers. As I said, I'm cautious as I'm sharing this because I don't know how well this will translate to other markets, but that is what we're seeing. And then I want to agree on the data. We've also got a very strong data package. In actual fact, a lot of our publishers say that is better than what they get from the other platforms. But knowing your audience, specifically for us, we measure where people stop listening. So you can see where you start losing your audience. You can see, what time of day. You can roughly see on which platform where they are, and also the demographics. And those things are incredibly useful for evaluating whether you're connecting with the audience or not.
Great. Thank you so much. We have a question just here.
Thank you. So my name is Tiago. I am from PodSqueeze, which is a tool for post-production and promotion of podcasts. I have a question for Emma regarding YouTube. We also love SEO. SEO is amazing. But I'm curious about how do you use SEO to structure the titles of YouTube? Do you use the same strategy as the SEO that you use for blog content? And what kind of specific tools, if any, do you use to optimize the titles? And the second question is as well regarding what you said about shorts. There's a difference between shorts, which for YouTube is less than 60 seconds, and clips, where you actually do a YouTube video that can be up to, let's say, 5 minutes. Do you do both, and what is the difference?
I'll do the first one. I'm just trying to remember what it was. Oh, the SEO question. Yes, and also what's great about YouTube, if it's not working, we'll change the title. Like, you don't have to be set into it all
And
the
you can
time.
A/B test, right?
And you can't A/B test title, but you can A/B. I was meant to mention that and I forgot. But you A/B test all of your thumbnails. So, and as I said, it's really key. Make sure your thumbnail text and your title text are working together. And if it's not working at all, we've changed it, and you can watch to see if that's picking up in any pace once you change it. So I'd do that. We also like to use our best friend, my favorite colleague, ChatGPT. I know that's really naughty to say, but they're really to put in keywords to see what people are searching. YouTube has all of its own recommendations as well. But obviously, we're content makers, so you have a good idea. Look up, put into YouTube what other people are titling their podcasts as well. And the second question, shorts versus vertical. So shorts, which I didn't get to mention, that's another great thing to be able to be using on YouTube as well. So shorts is when you have a little vertical video moment that is in relation to the full length VOD. And a good way you can use YouTube to decide what vertical video moments to pick out. It can actually tell you when audiences are dropping off or picking up again, when they're engaged. So you can use the retention graph to figure out where you want to what vertical video moment to pull out for your YouTube short. And you want to make sure when you're uploading the YouTube short that you make sure it's linked with that full length video as well, which you can't do for clipped. You can't link the clips, but you could link a short to the clip. So yeah, always working, as you said, with the algorithm.
Does anyone else want to jump in? No?
I might just say, for people starting out in video, a tool that we've really, I'm not paid by them or anything, but a tool that we've loved is Riverside. If you haven't seen or used Riverside, the beauty of it from an audio perspective is it gives us high quality wave recordings of each source of every person that joins it, and we started using it during COVID, obviously, with remote recording when everyone wanted to use Zoom and the audio was just so terrible. But some of the features that they've added over time are really great, including AI recognition of clips. So once you've finished, it will go through and suggest, based off the transcript, it does a transcript and then it looks at the transcript and it uses AI to analyse it and suggests some short social media clips already clipped up, vision and audio synced. You can overlay titles and graphics, and so like a one-man band producer can almost produce up some short video clips really easily, and our producers love that ability. We'll do some high-quality production at a later date, but if they need to just get a clip out because it's newsworthy or something like that, they can do that in Riverside and get all that sort of stuff as well. And they've also now got clean-up tools in there, so it's a really sort of handy tool, I reckon, to start.
Is it just in English or is it? Not sure.
I think they are supporting other languages. I'd have to check, obviously, because we're using English, but yeah.
When it comes to SEO, there's two bits of kit that I've been using that I think are great. First one is Google Trends, which I think everyone is using and everyone kind of gets that. But the second one, and I've just had to remind myself what it is, and actually if you show my computer on the screen, you will be able to see it, but it's called Answer the Public. So Answer the Public, free bit of kit, you can put in a term, for example, Trump, and then it will come up with all of the questions that people are asking around Donald Trump on the internet at that moment, and it kind of categorizes them in quite a smart way. So it's a good bit of kit that I've been using.
I was going to quickly say another great service if you're getting started out as well is Descript. Descript is really fantastic because it also does automatic camera changes. Like Premiere Pro doesn't even do that, so maybe we'll come out with a new one. But so that's also another really fantastic AI transcript tool that's great for video and audio, and also because podcast and video teams can work together in it, so that really streamlines your workflow as well.
And I cannot believe that it has taken us 2 hours to mention AI. Unbelievable. Guys, that is the end of our second session. Thank you to all the speakers. We will be back in an hour, maybe just under an hour. We'll kick off at 2 o'clock, where we have 2 more sessions. There is lunch up by the exhibition as you came in. And yeah, see you in a bit. Thank you.